I think it's over, Greta. I said to my wife of 5 years, who was sitting in front of me in a semi-crowded bar. I know she could hear me, but she squinted her eyes like she did not understand what I was saying. Can't we find another solution? Greta asked, taking a sip of her wine. I mean, you can't be that serious in ending things with me. I stared down at my empty beer glass, tracing my finger around the rim. That was us. Full once, exciting, like we couldn't get enough. But over time, we just drained each other dry, struggling to fit into each other's lives. The truth is, we're just different people. I'm a summer person, she's into winter. I like staying in, she loves going out. I'm a dog person, she adores cats. And so our relationship became like this glass. Empty, cold. Honestly, I can't even remember the last time I saw her body. We tried everything. I was open to every suggestion you had, but somehow we've ended up right back where we started. I sighed, seeing this as a failure in life. One of our biggest fights had been about kids. I wanted them, and she didn't. When things escalated, she would reel me back in with empty promises of having to reconsider her choice of being a parent. Give me another year, she would say. I will be ready then. Greta took my hands and gave me a serious, almost pleading look. Rick, I love you. You know that, right? You can't just leave all this behind. 5 years is not a small deal. Maybe love isn't enough, I said, pulling my hands back. Her touch no longer brought me comfort. It only reminded me of everything that wasn't working. Over the years, I came to realize that Greta had fallen out of love with me. Yet everything we owned, the car, the flat, was in my name. Logically, a divorce would mean splitting it all, but the reality was different. While I managed several companies for my clients, Greta drifted from one job to another, finding financial stability in me. I never once asked her to contribute, not even for an ice cream. One last shot, okay? Give me one last shot at trying, and if you don't feel this spark after that, I'm letting this go. It's the least you can do. We can start talking about having children. I interrupted her because I'd been through this roller coaster for playing with my weak spot too many times. Greta, just stop with this nonsense. You and I both know that ship has sailed a long time ago. I paused, thinking if this is a good idea. I will give this one more shot. But if that does not work... Greta stood up, signaling to the waiter for a check and for reminding me that we could go home. I am happy that you've made this wise decision, Rick. Not sure about the wise part, I thought to myself while we continued our walk home, not saying another word. 3 days later. The air conditioning hummed loudly, trying to keep the August heat at bay. I was at home, working remotely and putting together lunch, waiting for Greta to come back. I got it, she said on the front door, chirping with happiness. I was confused by her sudden outburst of excitement, but I played along. What have you got? I asked. Her hand gestured for me to sit down, and I did. Let's get straight into it. I wanted us to try, let's say, something new, something we have never dared to do before. I raised my look, now intrigued by her proposition. Let's do a roleplay. We will pretend like we do not know about each other, and we will rent an apartment to hook up in. But didn't we do that already? I questioned, but she quickly interrupted me. With another person. It'll be like a threesome of complete strangers. I stood up from the table, vividly frustrated. Greta, what pills are you on? You want me to share you with another person? And with a man? It's absurd. It's not. I've read that bringing in someone new can reignite the spark we've lost. And don't you dare lie to me that you've never been with a man before. I know your life story and accepted you for who you are. She laid a hand on me for reassurance. Besides, it's a stranger. Someone we'll never see again. Is she being serious? I couldn't tell. I don't know if I'm comfortable doing that. I sat down again, imagining the scenes that would unfold. I dropped back into my seat, rubbing my temples, imagining the possible chaos. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. Don't overthink it. We can call it out anytime if it doesn't feel right. And if this too doesn't help us, we'll be heading straight for the divorce attorney," Greta said, pleading desperately with her puppy-eyed look. I could see how important this was to her. A sudden rush of adrenaline hit me. Could this be the spark we needed to save our relationship? Or would it all come crashing down, consumed by flames? "So, who's the third guy?" I asked, cautiously. "My former gym instructor," she said, smiling. "He's already agreed, and we all understand after this, we never talk about it again." "Why the hell did you talk about having a threesome with your husband to your damn gym instructor?" I raised my voice, anger trembling over me. So much for the stranger part of it. "Relax, honey. We accidentally stumbled upon each other today, and we're reviewing an interesting article about threesomes." I could feel the excitement drain out of me. It was just another one of those things Greta had set up without really consulting me. I agreed, but it felt hollow. The sooner it was over, the better. The night had arrived, and I'd done what I could to mentally prepare myself for what was coming. Greta had gone all out, her hair perfectly curled, and she wore the thinnest, deep red dress that clung to her in a way that was impossible to ignore. She had instructed me to show up half an hour after she did, handing me the keys to the hotel room like it was a covert operation. Thankfully, it was a nice hotel. Clean, modern, with dim lighting, and a spacious room that definitely didn't give off any sketchy vibes. I felt a strange, edgy excitement, realizing that deep down, part of me had always toyed with fantasies like this. But in my mid-30s, actually going through with it? I hadn't seen that one coming. When I reached the door, I took a breath, tried to collect myself, and carefully turned the key. I opened it slowly, peeking in to find Greta and the guy just casually sipping wine. Relief washed over me to see that they still had their clothes on, and Greta had positioned herself a good 5 meters away from him. That, at least, made things a little easier. Greta looked over and smiled, gesturing me in. "And who might you be?" I almost forgot the roleplay part. I first went to Greta and kissed her hand, introducing myself, and then I turned to the guy. He was tall, well-built, with a hint of scruff along his jawline, green, sharp eyes, intense. The guy was, well, pretty much every definition of gorgeous. He extended a hand, his firm grip, and I shook it, feeling a bit ridiculous in the formality of it all. "Hi, I'm Trevor. Pleasure to meet you," he said, expressing his wide, sparkly smile. I could see why Greta chose him. "Rick," I replied. "Pleasure's mine." The first part of the evening passed in a blur of light-hearted conversation, all three of us tossing out absurd, made-up stories about ourselves. Greta claimed she worked for a top-secret intelligence agency. Trevor said he trained whales, and I insisted I owned a circus franchise. It was silly, childish, and exactly what I needed to calm the nerves. As the wine helped me relax, Greta leaned over and kissed me, pulling me back to memories of our first nights together. I kissed her back, our hands tangling. But then she turned and did the same with Trevor, and there it was, that flicker of jealousy. She caught my eye, smirking, and then gently pulled Trevor closer to me. "Now you," she whispered. I was hesitant, but Trevor closed the distance, guiding me as he kissed me slowly from my chest up, igniting something unexpected, electric. I lost myself in it, moving from one kiss to another, hands finding their way to him. Somehow, I kept reaching for him, and he for me. Greta's eyes sparkled as she watched, with a mischievous grin spreading across her face as she sipped her wine. Kisses deepened and intensified as our clothes started falling off. Greta joined in, laughing softly, pulling us both closer, her hands guiding us, connecting us in a way I could not imagine in my wildest dreams. Hours passed, and time seemed to disappear as we gave ourselves over completely to the moment. By the end, we lay tangled together, slowly breathing in the early morning. 2 days later. I've been washing dishes nonstop, scrubbing every surface in the house until it looked as though I had a team of housekeepers on hand, spotless. I needed something, anything, to keep my mind off that night. The whole point of this was to reignite the passion between Greta and me, but somehow, it sparked a different kind of fire. I went into that night thinking of us, of Greta, of what it would mean for our marriage, and she had been sweeter, more attentive since. But now, just 2 days later, my thoughts kept drifting somewhere they shouldn't. "Missed a spot," Greta remarked, eyeing the glass I'd been scrubbing for the 5th time. I forced a smile, trying to seem casual. "Hey, Greta," I said, unable to keep it in. "I was thinking about the other night," and she cut me off quickly. "Oh, don't worry," she said with a small shrug. "We won't do it again. I'm sorry too. I thought it would be different, but I felt, I don't know, like I was cheating on you. It just made me feel bad." Her tone softened. "We promised we wouldn't talk about it again." "Oh, okay," I murmured, though it was the last thing I wanted to say. She might have felt awkward about it, but I felt the opposite. Genuinely happy. Like I'd forgotten all our usual problems for once. I didn't feel like I'd betrayed her at all, honestly. She'd been the one who brought the damn thing up. But I couldn't exactly tell her that I'd had a great time and wanted to do it again. She glanced at her phone and grabbed her purse. "Well, I'm off to Jenny's. She had a rough week, so I'll probably just stay over at her place tonight. That's okay?" "Yeah, of course," I said. "Jenny's just a few blocks away, so if you need me to pick you up, just give me a call." "I will. Bye," she said shortly and walked out the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Again. The house was spotless, work was done, and there was nothing left to distract myself with. And as much as I hated to admit it, my mind kept circling back to that night and Trevor. Did I have a crush on him? Ridiculous, I thought, shaking my head. I'm a married man. Focus, Rick. You don't have the infidelity problem. To clear my head, I decided to go for a long walk. I didn't know how long I'd been out, but the evening air was cool, and my mind started to settle. On my way back, I decided to make a nice dinner. Lasagna always worked to ease my thoughts, so I popped into the grocery store for a few ingredients. As I rounded the produce aisle, I heard a familiar voice. "Hi, Rick," a voice behind me said with a cheerful smile. "Haven't seen you in a while. Hope you're doing well, but I need to rush. Say hi to Greta for me, would you?" "Oh, will do, Jenny," I replied, smiling as I waved her off. Okay, I thought. It's on. 1 week later. I was still waiting for the perfect moment to expose her. I knew Greta was hiding something, but I needed to find out exactly what. I'd gone over every possible scenario, trying to rationalize what had happened. Jenny always knew when Greta was coming over. If Greta wanted to surprise her, she'd at least show up earlier or call first. But that night, no call, no sign. The story she'd given me just didn't add up. The only way to get the truth was to take the next step, go through her phone. Greta kept her phone glued to her, never out of sight, except today. Today, she'd left it on the table and stepped into the shower. Rookie mistake, I thought. I picked up the phone and entered the code I'd caught her using before. Bingo. My gut told me to check Snapchat, and there it was. Months of messages with someone named MrZen. They'd been exchanging those disappearing photos, flirting back and forth. One message even detailed how he would pick her up that night she'd supposedly gone to Jenny's. The chat had gone silent in the past few days, but it didn't matter. I had proof. Greta was a cheater. God only knew how many others she'd been hiding. I didn't even notice her until she snatched the phone out of my hands. "Oh, this idiot!" She brushed it off, trying to laugh. "Why are you going through my phone?" "Who is MrZen?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. Nobody, really." She let out a nervous laugh. "Just some guy drooling over me. I thought it was funny to text him back." "And where were you that night when you said you went to Jenny's?" I asked. "At her place, obviously," she shot back, defensive. "Why are you even asking me that?" Her response made my next decision crystal clear. I let out a long, slow breath and said simply, "I want a divorce." She just stood there, her lips trembling. I grabbed a few of my things, threw them into a bag, and walked out, her voice trailing behind me. "How could you do this to me? After all these years, I wanted children with you." I'd had enough of her stories, her twists, her manipulation. I didn't throw away 5 years of marriage. She did. I went straight to the bowling alley nearby. Bowling had once been my thing. I'd even been a semi-pro, but Greta never liked it. said it was pointless getting all hyped up over a pair of cones. Now, as I grabbed the ball and felt the familiar weight, I felt a bit of my old self creeping back. I lined up my shot. The pins blurred as I pulled my arm back and released, sending the ball crashing down the lane with way more force than necessary. Strike. But instead of the satisfaction I used to feel, there was just frustration. As I watched the pins scatter, memories of Greta came tumbling in, faster than I could push them away. The first time I had a real inkling something was off was nearly a year ago. She'd started working late more often, her phone always buzzing with new messages that she never let me see, and her smile, always distant, always guarded. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just stress from work, but in reality, it was me, trying to justify what I already knew deep down. She knew she would have a secure and easy life with me while finding passion in someone else. Another ball, another strike, but it didn't feel any better. Whoa, if you keep bowling like that, you're gonna bring down the whole place. I turned to see Trevor, standing behind me with that easy grin, wearing a perfectly fitted white shirt and black pants. Out of all the people, I was actually glad to see him. "Hey man," he said, stepping closer. "You alright?" For a moment, I wanted to just unload everything right then and there, but I remembered our pact from that night, never to speak of it again. So instead, I said, just some personal stuff. He nodded, sensing the weight behind my words, but not pressing further. "Tell you what, how about a 1v1? Might get your mind off things." "Yeah, sure," I said, a small smile finally breaking through. We fell into a steady rhythm, casually chatting between throws. He shared how he loved summer, and I told him how I was the same. We laughed about our shared love of dogs and how a perfect night for us meant staying in with a good movie rather than going out. As we bowled, each frame felt lighter, more natural, like I was rediscovering parts of myself I'd almost forgotten. After a few rounds, I suggested we grab a beer to cool off. Trevor agreed, and we headed over to the bar, chatting easily along the way. As we settled in with our drinks, Trevor asked, "So, are you seeing anyone?" I paused, taking a sip before answering. "Was, until recently." He nodded with a knowing smile. "Same here." I told him I was a little heartbroken, but weirdly enough, I felt guilty for not feeling more angry, more betrayed. This felt very hollow. Maybe I just got rid of a burden and was angry for the lost time. After a few more drinks, he leaned in a bit, lowering his voice. "Mind if I ask, do you swing the other way?" I glanced at him, trying to find the right words. "Honestly, I think so," I said, feeling oddly comfortable sharing that with him. "But I've been single for just a couple of hours now, so..." "Oh, I didn't want to be intrusive," he quickly added. "Just curious." We traded stories for a bit, and as the night wound down, we exchanged numbers before parting ways. Over the next few days, Greta's calls and texts kept coming, but I found myself less inclined to respond. I still felt a little bit of resistance. Because of the infidelity and everything that happened, I needed more time to process and to heal. 1 month later. I finally got over the fact that I was cheated on. I promised Trevor that I would give him a ring when I felt better, as I did not want to overwhelm him with my problems. After my call to him, Trevor and I had been chatting nonstop, like teenagers who have a crush on each other, and I felt this warm, fuzzy feeling each time. This was not the first time that I was attracted to a man, but it was definitely the best. I decided that the next time we went out, I'd confess to Trevor that I had a crush on him. I avoided mentioning Greta. I didn't want to know how he had agreed to that night with her, or what his reasons had been. I prefer to have that part of my life deleted. The day finally came. We arranged to go cycling since the weather was sunny, and we'd grab a drink afterwards. We planned to meet at the corner of the park. As I approached, I saw Trevor up ahead on his phone and arguing with someone. I slowed down, curiosity leading me closer, just in time to overhear a bit. "Forget it, Lucy, I'm not coming back to you. I'm perfectly happy now," he said, irritation clear in his voice. Was he dealing with an ex? After a few more words, he hung up and I walked up to him. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hugged me briefly, Yeah, I'm just tired of dealing with this girl. If you'd rather not talk about it, we can just go and cycle, I suggested. He nodded, looking relieved, and we set off down the trail. We cycled side by side, passing each other a few times in friendly competition. I noticed Trevor watching me, catching his gaze each time, and I couldn't help but look back. As we cycled along, Trevor suddenly broke the silence. Do you know the girl who was with us on the night we met? I froze for a moment, my heart skipping a beat. I wasn't expecting him to bring it up that night, but I tried to play it cool. Yeah, I know her, I said, trying to sound calm. Trevor looked over at me with a small, almost mischievous grin. Well, thanks to her, I met you. And honestly, I felt more attraction toward you that night than I did to her. She's been my girlfriend for 3 months. At that moment, it felt like my world was flipping upside down. I didn't know if I was hearing him right, and suddenly my bike nearly wobbled out from under me. I slammed the brakes, barely keeping myself from falling. Wait, my wife is your girlfriend? I asked, stunned, my voice trembling slightly. Trevor did the same thing, stopping so suddenly that he nearly flew off his bike. Ex-girlfriend. But wait, is Lucy your wife? He asked, eyes wide, his voice filled with confusion. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Her name is Greta, I corrected him, a sinking feeling in my gut. Trevor's face turned serious. Okay, we need a drink, like a really strong one, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. We found the nearest bar, still processing what had just been revealed. As we sat down, we didn't waste any time. We each threw back 2 shots of tequila like they were nothing, the burn of the alcohol barely registering against the confusion that had settled in my chest. Trevor leaned back in his seat, looking at me with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. So, yeah, I met Lucy at the gym. She was the one who approached me first, complimenting my appearance. I thought it was a little weird at first, but hey, I wasn't complaining. Then we started hooking up regularly, and she kept giving these excuses about how her roommate didn't allow guests. I thought it was strange, but didn't really ask questions. He paused, taking a sip of his drink, clearly deep in thought. I told her that I was bi and that I'm more into men. She suggested a threesome, wanted to make me happy. She said it would be fun. He chuckled, shaking his head. So, naturally, I said sure. I love spicing things up, but then she threw me for a loop when she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to roleplay. I leaned in, listening intently as he continued. She said I had to swear we'd never speak of that night again, that we'd depart as strangers. And when we did this thing, her name wasn't Lucy, she was Greta. He laughed again, but it wasn't a happy laugh. I didn't know what to think. I was just doing what she said. No questions, no complaints. Just following the rules she set out. But I had no idea she was married. He continued. I wanted to end things with her because I did not see her in that way. I told her she seemed shady, so I did not want to get involved with her. She kept bugging me for weeks now. My hands started shaking. Do you have a Snapchat? He raised his eyebrows at me. Yes, why is that relevant? What is your username? I looked at him firmly, already knowing the answer. MrZen. Why? Wait. He returned the look to me. You found out about our text, haven't you? That's why you left her. I signaled the waitress for another round of shots. It took me 5 damn years to find out why she was unfaithful to me. Trevor took my hand like he knew I was searching for comfort. Why did it take you so long to leave her? Because I was a weak fool, always staying because of the empty promises and fairy stories. She used to guilt trip me, knowing damn well it'll work. I took one of Trevor's hands, finally having the courage to speak up. My 5 years of marriage have been really dull, and I feel more attracted to you in this short time than I was attracted to her, ever. I didn't know if this was the liquid courage that gave me the sentence to say out loud, or were these my true feelings? Trevor flustered and leaned in front of the table towards me. Our eyes met 1 centimeter away, and our lips yearned for one another. In a split second, Trevor kissed me, and I returned the kiss. We forgot we were in a public place. All this time I was thinking about him, about that night, and wanting to repeat it. Nothing more really matters. My old life is fading away, and even though I may have moved on too quickly, This was something I should have done a long time ago. But if I did, I would not have met Trevor. We went to Trevor's house, simply repeating the night when we met, but now just the two of us. Even better. 3 months later. Months had flown by, and Greta was nothing more than a vague memory, a chapter I had all but erased. Trevor and I had blocked her on everything, not giving her the chance to spin any excuses. Life without her was unexpectedly refreshing, and Trevor and I were closer than ever. We even talked about moving in together someday, maybe even adopting kids, although we decided to take things slow. Rushing in wasn't necessary when we were already so sure about each other. And yes, I got a St. Bernard puppy, who I was out walking when the past suddenly came crashing back. I saw her from a distance, standing there in her usual dramatic way, eyes locked right on me. She didn't even hesitate, even with cars streaming down the street. "Rick!" she yelled, weaving through traffic without even looking. I stood still, watching as she barreled toward me, half amused by the ridiculousness of it all. When she reached me, her voice shook. "Rick, I've given myself some time, and I need to come clean." "Go on," I said, struggling to keep a straight face. She looked around, lowering her voice to a whisper like we were co-conspirators. "I cheated on you with Trevor, but I only did it because he seduced me. He said he'd hurt you if I stopped seeing him." I let out a laugh so loud it startled my puppy. "Wow, Lucy, that's the best thing you could come up with?" I said, unable to hold back. "How low have you fallen?" Her face flushed with frustration, but she kept at it, desperation creeping into her voice. "Rick, I'm different now. I've changed. I'm ready to settle down, have a family. You are the only light in my life, the only one I ever really cared about." I shook my head. "Greta, I'm into men now. Especially Trevor. He's a better person to me than you ever were." Greta's expression shifted from shock to rage, her eyes narrowing. "How could you get over me so fast?" she shouted, her voice filled with fury. She shoved me, her anger boiling over as she tried to hold back tears. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" I stood my ground. "Greta, you threw everything away yourself. You lied, manipulated, and expected me to just wait around. I am not obligated to explain myself to you anymore." Before she could say something, Trevor appeared behind us. She looked like she might lunge at him, but he stepped in with a calm and steady voice. "Thank you, Greta," he said, a faint smile on his face. Greta blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "If it wasn't for you," Trevor continued, "we'd never have found each other." He reached out, taking my hand in his, fingers intertwining. "You did us a favor." She stumbled backwards, her face collapsing as reality sank in. Trevor and I didn't look back. We just turned and walked away, hand in hand, while Greta's sobs faded into the background. As we walked away, leaving Greta in the rear view, I looked over at Trevor and said, "Always some drama, eh?" He laughed, and my new puppy was busily batting at a pile of leaves on the sidewalk, entirely oblivious to all the human chaos. I watched the puppy play for a moment, then turned back to Trevor. "You know what's funny?" I said. He raised an eyebrow, listening as I went on. "I kept wondering why I moved on from my marriage so fast, why I didn't give myself some time alone. But the truth is, I felt alone for years." He nodded, taking in my words. I realized I needed to know something, a small insecurity creeping in. And well, I feel selfish asking this, but what did you see in me? Trevor looked at me with a steady gaze and said, "A lonely man, just like me." He paused, the air between us feeling heavier, more honest. I was in a relationship too, for a long time, but it was more like having a roommate. I kept thinking I just needed to try harder, but eventually I tried to force it by dating women, hoping it'd feel right, but my heart was always somewhere else. He reached out, his hand resting gently on my waist. His touch was warm and grounding, and I felt myself lean into him. "That night we first got together," he said, his voice low, "it was different. There was this chemistry, this pull. I couldn't stop thinking about you afterwards." I felt something stir deep inside and reached out to wrap my arms around him, returning the warmth. I whispered into his ear, "Me too. You don't even know how much." And we stayed there, wrapped up in each other, letting the world fade away for a little while. Silence settled comfortably around us, and in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Imagine if your whole life could shift because of a single night. I spent so many years feeling hollow, sad, and untouched by real love, only to find that one bright thread of hope in Trevor, someone who changed everything. I'm not saying that you need another person to rediscover your happiness, but when you do find someone, whether it's a friend, family member, or lover, the right person can bring you back to life. With them by your side, those old wounds and scars finally have a chance to heal. The end. Is it important to let go of the past to start a new journey? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.